Yes.
All right. Now let's see if I can share the slides. If not.
There you go.
Yeah, is it good?
Yeah, it has MS Teams information showing.
All right,
There you
here we
go.
go. All right, so everyone, thanks for joining. Let's go to the slideshow view. So sorry for the logistics. We had to switch some Teams information last week, and we had some difficulties, so apologize. But hopefully next time will be a little smoother. Thanks everyone for joining this. This is our 28th meeting. Thanks, John and Bramislav for co-sponsoring. John, you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pete. This is our 28th. My name's John Froelich. I am an SVP with Bramislav, and we've been doing this for almost a decade now, Pete.
Yeah,
We're
8
excited
years,
to,
I think.
yeah, we're excited to share all of this input. And as you know, Bramislav is a key partner with SAP, one of the leaders in revenue recognition and order to cash. So thank you, Pete.
Great. So anyway, we have a couple new folks, so we'll just do a little bit of house cleaning first, and then we'll jump in because we do want to get into some product updates, and then we will have Paul and Sunil from Warner Brothers Discovery going through their experience sharing and fire chat session later. So anyway, most of the content today will be available. We'll have very little roadmap information, but if there is roadmap information, just know that that roadmap information could change. Again, our goal has always been to automate and simplify revenue accounting. And so we now have an umbrella of solutions, automated revenue management. So that's really the portfolio of solutions that covers RevRec. And today we're going to be focused mainly on SAP Revenue Accounting Reporting, or the private cloud versions. We did do some public cloud updates early in the year, and they're available in the recording, and we will send some updates out about the public cloud materials with the meeting materials that come out with this meeting. So anyway, just so folks know. Just some of the differentiators, we'll skip that. I just want to make sure people are aware of our link. It's still there, the homepage. We have a few minor updates. We have the registration links for this meeting and the replays for the last couple meetings. The next meeting we think will be around February 9th or mid-February. We think we already have a high technology customer lined up to do the experience sharing session, and we'll share those details probably in December once we get that organized. So anyway, thanks for joining and participating. Today's session, we're going to go through the product updates first. We'll mainly start with Petra on the R3 1.3 add-on update, then Chin will cover the latest on S4 OP 2023. Chenchu we'll have some materials from Chenchu to send out after the call on EBRR. And then Paul should be able to join us almost around 1 o'clock to talk about their experience in RAR. And then if there's any time, we'll do some Q&A and wrap up. So John, anything to add before we start with Petra?
No, Pete, I think in the wrap up and certainly in the Warner Brothers, I think we'll see a very interesting overview of how we're beginning to see the convergence of order to cash and revenue recognition and compliance as inextricable links together. And we'll hear more about the power of that. And we'll be talking more about that in the future. So I'm excited for the updates from the product team.
Yeah, and one note, we do have Heidi on as well from the Brim team, so that's great in case there's questions on Brim and RAR, and we might have a little time to talk about that if, depending on how the agenda goes. All right, well, with that, let's let me stop sharing and we'll turn it over to Petra for the RAR 1.3 update.
Thank you very much, Pete. So this is Petra. Just okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Petr Janáček. I'm from the IIS group, from the maintenance group, and now regarding the update for SAP Revenue Accounting and Reporting version 1.3, there is the newest Service Pack 18 is out since 9th of October. The next service pack is planned to be delivered sometimes in second quarter of next year. Regarding the content of SP18, apart from usual error corrections, there is one thing that is worth to be mentioned. We delivered the integration into ECC tool for the local currency changeover. So if there is, there will be a country needing local currency changeover, it is now officially possible and supported for revenue accounting. However, if anyone wants to join or perform such a project, it is strongly recommended to contact the data management and landscape transformation group from SAP in order to get support. There is this note 3369008 describing so what shall be implemented, and contains also links to official SAP help.
So Petra, one question. So does that
Yes.
note also have the information of how a customer would reach out to the DMLT team?
Yes,
Or,
yes,
okay.
yes. There is a link to this group as well. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, this time it was very short. So are there any questions or some requests for 1.3? Otherwise, I will just switch over to Shin.
Okay, so folks, this is just a short update. I mean, we did go through it in August, and not a lot has changed since August with the release cycle. So any questions on the 1.3 product before we switch over to the S/4HANA product? Okay, sounds like no questions. All right, Petra, thanks so much.
Yeah,
now we're going to switch over to Chin.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks, Pete. Let me share my screen. Suppose you can see my screen. And this is the slides.
Yep, we can see them.
Yeah, so yeah, as I said, let me put into the presentation mode. And hopefully you can still see that. Yeah. So yeah, so this is speaking, I'm happy to give you a short updates on the recent enhancement and new features we have in S/4HANA 2023. Yeah, so in S/4HANA 2023, we have the three major enhancements. One is the so-called start date type 4, and this is defined by each fulfillment with a given event date. Secondly, we have the integration with central finance. And thirdly, we have the operational load with a given migration date. And you may already get the slides of the EKT materials. And in this meeting, I would like to shortly give you some highlights of all those features. So this first feature of the start date type with a defined event date of each fulfillment is to serve the purpose that you can trigger fulfillments with time slices by a given fulfillment event. This would mean that you are able to group some similar time-based POB, and each of them can be triggered at different point of time. This can be used in the following scenario. Assume that you deliver a bunch of subscription to an enterprise company, and each employee of the enterprise can activate the subscription at any point of time. And this would mean that they would have a bunch of different activation. And as you can see that you can then trigger the different activation at any point of time. And usually those subscriptions should have the similar pattern. That, for example, in these slides, you will see that they have the same duration. And that's one of the important prerequisites. And by using this feature, you can dramatically reduce the number of POBs. You can use only one POBs, but by creating a lot of fulfillments as you want. I think this is very similar to the so-called old start type 3 in the classic contract management, but this brings in the optimized contract management, this start type 4 brings more clarity on user interface and also on traceability. And then the second important feature we have is revenue accounting now is able also to integrate with central finance. This is because revenue accounting is designed as a receiving system and support different center component in distributed scenario. And this has the similarity for central finance because central finance is also to serve the purpose to collect different data from different center component in a distributed scenario. What we can do is now we can reuse the mapped data from different center component in central finance. And also then after the mapping done by the central finance, revenue accounting would use those mapped data. So in the next slide, you will see an example. For example, you have two center component would like to send information to revenue accounting, and in each of those system, you would have a company code, but you know that the company code 100 and 200 from different system actually is relevant is the same in the receiving system. For example, is the company code 35, and you have already configured a mapping of central finance. Then you can reuse the mapping information in revenue accounting so that you don't need to do a kind of other customer body or customer implementation to map those information again. This would save the effort for our customer to implement revenue accounting if they have already a similar implementation in central finance. Last but not least, I think we also enhance our operational load that we are more flexible to load the existing sales order into the system with a given migration date. This is coming from a very concrete use case is that at the very beginning, the customer may have a ECC system and they have SD RefReg solution running. And after the system is upgraded to S4, the SD RefReg solution is not available anymore. And before revenue accounting is completely on board, there is a period that they don't have any RefReg solution running, and their revenue posting would be missing. And once revenue accounting is on board, they can load the sales order and they can specify a migration date. Actually, is the date when the RefReg stop running, and revenue accounting would generate a kind of productive catch-up posting for the revenue that are missing in the period where there's no RefReg solution is running. And then by that, we can also provide more flexibility for customers during their initial load or operational process, and also give them more time to onboard revenue accounting. Okay, so I think that's all the highlights I would like to bring to you during the development and after release of OP 2023.
And maybe we just want to summarize. If you go back to, and we're going to provide there are these EKT materials we call early knowledge transfer that summarize these features. And maybe you go back to the top agenda slide. We can just summarize that for the folks, Chin, in case there are questions. I know I want to ask you a question about this start date 4, because I think there was some naming differences for this. But if you go back to your slide 2, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So
is this one?
Yeah, exactly. So just so folks know on the phone, basically there's 3 types or 3 bundles of 3 groups of innovation, right? It's the start date type defined by each fulfillment event date. That's the first one. Then there's the second bundles around integration with central finance. And then the third one is the operational load, right? Improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe on the start tape 4, I know this has come up from questions. I thought this may have had a slightly different name, or was there a different naming convention for this on ERP? Just want to make sure there's no confusion on that label for folks on the phone. I remember talking to one of the consultants that come up at one of the customers, and on ERP, it may have had a slightly different, on the add-on, a slightly different name than on S4. I was just wondering if that is the case or not. If you don't know, we'll leave it as a follow-up item. Chin, you still there?
He's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still there. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so do you know what the history is of the naming on the start tape type 4?
Okay, so yeah, I think it's because when we redesigned the OCM, we first start with started type 3, and we use started type 3 for a more simple use case. That is, you set a start date when the event happens. And then we do not want to misuse started type 3 again, and therefore, when we redesign these more complex scenarios, we name it as started type 4.
Okay.
So Hid, was this a feature available in CCM and where you're improving OCM as part of this process? Because I know there's a big initiative to constantly improve OCM, as that is the focus of SAP from a deployment perspective, right?
Yeah, that's part of the constant improvement of and to reach to a kind of feature parity of CCM
Okay.
Okay, so this is now feature parity with that I guess start tape type 3 feature in ERP 1.3. Okay. Yeah, that's why I want to make sure it's clear, because I know it can be a little confusing.
I have a question
go ahead.
about central finance, Pete. And maybe Hin, you can clarify that a little bit. I know there's information I looked at some of it quickly. Can you talk a little bit more, because a traditional central finance deployment requires the use of an interface from these local systems into, usually it's magnitude or something else. How does that relate to revenue recognition, RAR? And do you still need that tool? How does that all work?
Yeah, okay. So you do not necessarily to say that the central finance is there. You can still use, for example, any kind of body like the RAR inbound processing body. But I think the use case is that some of the customer of RAR already deployed central finance, or they have planned to deploy central finance. And you already have all the mapping done in the central finance. You do not want to do that again in revenue accounting, so that you have one source of truth, that is central finance. And central finance provides, I think, even some more flexibility. For example, they can, especially in this case, you can map the company code, and by body of RAR, you cannot, of revenue accounting, for example, company code is a key that you cannot simply change. So actually, central finance gives some more flexibility, and also it's a use case where for customer they already want to or has already planned the central finance implementation. And when you deploy RAR on top of central finance, then you don't need to configure everything again in revenue accounting.
Okay. Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, so let's see if there's any questions. If not, we'll go to we have an extra topic that we want to cover, actually potentially 2 extra topics we want to cover before we start the experience sharing session. So let's see, are there any questions coming through? All right, so I know Heidi's still on. So Heidi, are you still on? Just want to make sure, because we'll talk about now Brim and RAR if you're still on.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. So anyway, let's start with so we've had some situations where, and this, John, I think this came from some customers. So this is like a bonus topic here. We've had some questions around the Brim and RAR scenarios, and there's been a little bit of confusion in some cases about when RevRec should be covered with RAR and Brim, and when maybe RevRec can be covered with Brim only. I mean, in general, mostly what we see, and I think Heidi, we were talking about this yesterday, I think it's 95 or some very high percentage in the 90s that usually customers need Brim and RAR to handle RevRec with the cases that are married with convergent invoicing. So let me just share, see if I can share some slides.
It's coming.
I still see previous PowerPoint.
Yeah, I see the white so far.
Sorry, my team's just crashed. Apologies. John, I'm not sure if you can share the slides or Heidi, I just sent them out, the convergent invoicing ones. And we can use that as talk track.
So about the conversion, I have your main deck.
Yeah.
It just
Heidi,
came.
did it come through to you yet? Or you got it?
Oh, let me see. You sent. Oh, I'm opening. See if I can present it.
Yeah, it just came in for me too.
Okay. Yeah, it's not very big. It's only 2
can...
megabytes.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, it's coming through there.
Shoot. I have too many things here.
Like everyone.
Yeah. No, that's not it. Yeah, here.
There it is. Yeah, there you go.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so this is from the EKT materials, I think, for Brim, and this is convergent invoicing, right? So maybe Heidi, maybe you want to explain the special use case when this could be used by customer or is using by customers, and then we can kind of extrapolate it out to kind of more non-corner case use cases.
Okay, so let me explain a little bit history, why there's a CI, revenue recognition, and RAR both existing within SAP, right? Because Brim started really ramp up 2009, 2010 timeframe, and back then we received the largest customer like Microsoft, Apple, and those customers really required revenue recognition for high volume and for consumption data. And back then, I don't. When is RAR started, P?
RAR was 2015, and we did the first, I think, Brim integration with Suzy around 2016, I think, was when the first started.
Yeah, so you can see back then there was no RAR options for us. So we developed our own solutions for high volume, high consumption, especially point of sales data to handle the revenue recognitions. And when RAR existed 2015, I remember the Lexmark back then, the integration, that was one of the one I worked on with Brim integrations. So because this is require consistent update from our side, and we are very basic revenue recognitions. And as I said, it's also focus on high volume, high consumption based, and the majority do not even have a contract, or some even don't have a knowing customer numbers. Those kind of scenarios, we did the revenue recognition on CI, and basically use the event and then to trigger revenue recognitions for time-based, and the trigger, for example, by click, by downloading, or by enter the park, those kind of scenarios. And the advantages is using CI and CC integration. You can do a quick calculation, splitting things for high volume consumption real-time data. If you don't have that requirement, I mean, nowadays implementation, first thing you should think, if you have revenue recognition requirement, first things you should think about RAR. And then there's, as P said, we discussed that there are 5% really cannot handle by RAR because they are consumption data, they are point of sales, and they are high volume and require real-time postings and those kind of scenarios. Then we go with the CI and CC. There's different options, and there's a lower level of customization sometimes is required to posting the revenue recognitions into the right GL account. So
Yep.
Pete, and anything else you want me to?
No, I think that's good. That's what we want to clear. And John, I don't know if you want to, talk about your situation that you've seen with customers, but again, just want to make sure it's clear that there are some RevRec capabilities within Brim, but it's very focused. It's very specific on a special type of use case, and we don't see it that frequently, right? So, but just want to make sure there's clarity on that. So.
Yeah, no, I think Heidi helped clarify those, and I think there are certainly scenarios. I think the message here is, again, SAP has the right answer and has the most robust overall ecosystem to provide an integrated order to cash to compliance scenarios, right? In this case, where you have a high volume, high velocity scenario where you really don't have to do anything fancy in terms of allocations or activity like that. And what you're doing is posting real time or as quickly to real time as possible. It may very well be that a CI/CC will work. And it could also be that in a hybrid scenario, you may use a combination of them for your different business units, right? So we've run into customers where there's also this confusion, and why you and I and Heidi created those charts, Pete, about the Brim and RAR, and Brim being primarily operational in its nature, helping drive the order to cash solution, and RAR, or revenue recognition, being that finance aspect of it to make sure that you're counting the revenue in the right place at the right time in accordance with 606. And I think we'll also see, Heidi and Pete, we're talking here about, on-prem, quote unquote, but there will also be, as we evolve to public cloud, where event-based revenue recognition versus subscription billing or other scenarios will all be hybrids, in which we really need to think about that combination and the overall order to cash process that links into the finance aspects of it. And I think another thing, Heidi, that you would recommend, and is maybe an interesting topic in the future for us, but it is the necessary parts of AR, right? And what's the role of FICA versus FIAR? And how does that, by the way, relate to how you're recognizing revenue? So, there's a lot of interesting scenarios here.
Yeah, I don't know, Pete, if you want me to go through this deck, because I don't know the audience, how much they know about the brand, because brand in general is handling high volume, high consumption data. It's just basically like John mentioned, the contract accounting, the difference between contract accounting and account receipt. Hello?
ఇంకొక 2 hours లో కాల్ చేస్తా. ఓకేనా, ఎలా ఉన్నారు? అంత బాగుందా?
Can you
Sorry,
mute?
someone, I'm trying to mute.
Yeah, I got it,
sorry.
Pete. I muted.
Thanks.
Okay, so the contract accounting basically just sterilized and then high volume account receivable. All it does is handling not only the high account receivable, also high transaction. When you see here, sometimes you see what we call BIT, billable item. So billable item is, which means, give you example, like a telecom scenario. As me, I'm a BP person, but my billable items could be thousands just within a day because I click online, consume data for 1 minute, I'm off, and then another consumption of a phone, and then I'm calling, that I'm texting multiple peoples and back and forth, and those are all considered one of the billable item, and you aggregated them doing the real time posting in the system. And for this case, if telco, for example, if a requirement revenue recognition real time, that will be challenge for that would be challenging to post in real time. Luckily, typically using BRIM, we aggregated all the tax, all the telephone calls, all the billing calls, all the online consumptions together, and then typically it's monthly billed to the customer. At this case, you can read the contract and then post into RAR, get all allocated, and then revenue recognized based on the certain criteria there. So, but all the detail, all the traceability is remain within BRIM components. I don't know, this is just high level. I don't know how deep, because this group is for mainly for RAR, right? Not necessarily
Yeah, I mean, I
everybody.
don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you know, we want to go too deep, but I think it is
Yeah.
helpful. We will send these slides out, and
Mhm.
certainly people can ask questions here. We have a little time, but I mean, we just want to clarify this use case. But we do have about half of the RAR customers using BRIM, and they use it very actively. I know that we just went through a feedback cycle with our consulting teams over the last literally few quarters, I guess 3 quarters. And, you know, we have now turned a bunch of product improvements related to BRIM and RAR suggestions over to our development team for assessment for the next development cycle. So we know this is you know, an active topic in the community. I just want to make sure we're addressing that one clarification. And then, you know, I think any information like this, Heidi, is very helpful for customers in general. So we got a question too from Sarab.
Hey, hi, Pete.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yes.
I hope you can hear me.
Yep,
Thanks,
we can
Heidi,
hear
for
you.
sharing this detail, and it's very interesting to know that we do have something within the CI
Yeah, we
space for
will
revenue recognition.
we'll share these slides with the follow-up materials. Yep.
Correct. So the question which I have is, you know, you mentioned 2 reasons like why we had this revenue recognition. Earlier, RAR was not there when this whole thing started from the BRIM side, and also you mentioned other reason is high volume customers, right?
Yeah.
And also
With the
consumption. There's consumption
consumption too.
pieces that
Yes.
come out of this utility
Exactly.
engine where BRIM came from. Yeah.
Exactly. So my question would be like, you know, what now we, and Pete, to you as well, that now we are in OCM, right, which is more performance, like, you know, oriented, like it's quite like fast, able to handle like, you know, mass data as
Yeah,
well.
I mean now
Is there any,
RAR, right? RAR is a generation ahead what it was in 2015 because it's all on HANA and OCM. Yeah.
right. So is there any other reason, like still any customer should be thinking about like revenue recognition on CI, or with the path forward, like we are actually like, you know, even for like high volume customers, you know, with the consumption and all, you suggest like, you know, we should still be going with OCM, RAR integration with them.
I mean, I'll let Chin's on and Svetlana on, but I don't know if you can comment, but I mean, in general, I think you're on the right path. We only mentioned this BRIM part because some customers were coming back to us saying, I don't need RAR, I can do everything with BRIM. And we're just trying to make sure that we clarify that misunderstanding. It's really, you know, we always recommend RAR for RevRec. It's just that there are some very specific cases where, you know, in a BRIM scenario, you might not need RAR. But in general, like we said, 95% of the time we see that you would need RAR.
Okay.
Pete, can I add a little bit to that question as well?
Sure.
So in our experience, when we were designing this for Warner Brothers, we did evaluate both the options, you know, using revenue recognition, because we know there is an example of a media company, high volume media company using pure CI for revenue recognition purposes. But for us, two things which stand out here was, or which stood out was that if you are doing allocations, that's not the solution. And if you are using, if you want to use different deferral methods like a 365-day basis, and you want to have something else for a different set of performance obligations, right? Then these are the two key factors for us, which we said, because the CI component, whatever the revenue recognition is available there, that cannot handle it. And if you have to do it, you have to do a lot of customization there. You can still do it, but it amounts to a lot of customization, at least for the deferral method, not for the allocations. That is strictly ruled out. So these are the two things which prompted us to move away from that and to use RAR. But definitely that's a use case for some customers who don't want to do those things. Then that's a very good solution because you save a lot of time.
Yes, I think that's a great clarification, right? And thanks for that additional background, Sunil. I think that's very helpful.
Yes, and you really nailed it. As I said, the majority should go with RAR for complying for certain functionalities and also further enhanced. And but the CI was developed back then. Of course, it's an easy implementation if you don't have a high requirement, and then for high volume consumption based data only. But for the rest, should go straight with evaluate RAR first before you jump to the CI.
Yeah, and then to the other question about the volume on S/4HANA OCM, maybe Chin, you want to make a comment. I mean, there was a lot of work spent between ERP and OCM, and all the learnings from ERP went into the redesign of OCM for HANA, right? To take all advantage of the in-memory technology. So, I mean, the performance.
I can comment on this.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, we actually, by the sizing, so-called sizing and performance measurement, we do see that the OCM and OIP has improvement also on the performance, because technically speaking, the new inbound processing table has fixed the table, and in comparison to the old version, you have generated tables, and also because we have now some new code refactorings in OCM, the performance is better than the CCM. And from a data volume perspective, because the database is not changed too much, the structure of the database is not changed too much, so the data volume is the footprint is still similar to CCM. And we also have already performed a kind of sizing exercise, and we do have a sizing Excel that is available for customers with some, and the customer would need to request to SAP for a pilot node, and then this sizing tool would be available.
So that's the sizing note. It hasn't changed, but this was what I think this was updated in February, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can also send that sizing note out as a link to the follow-up materials. So, yeah, I mean, that's what, that's my impression as well. I know we've done a lot of work, but in general, the performance characteristics on S/4HANA OCM are improved over, RAR ERP 1.3. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the show that we just went to that Heidi hosted about order to cash, we had a discussion, a work session, if you will, about the integration of BRIM, RAR, and things. And this is a topic, and of course, volume and velocity are huge decision-making criteria. And I think Paul Kluin's just joined, so we'll get to hear about what they're doing from a Warner Brothers perspective about volume and velocity and how that relates to some of the decisions they made. But interestingly, Pete, we were standing there, and we talked about volumes of tens of millions of transactions a month, and somebody raised their hand and said, "Hey, what happens when you have 400 million?" So again, I think it's one of those, as Heidi pointed out, and we talk about, is it's a decision for you as individual companies working with experts to sit down and think about what are my volume requirements? How often am I doing that? How complex or dense are my POBs or my contracts? And what do I need from a processing perspective on a regular basis? Can I take advantage of tools, like parallel processing or others? So, there's some great videos out there, as Pete is
I just
pointing
put a
out.
link, yeah.
And, look for more conversations and all of that. So, Pete, I'll jump back to you because I know Paul just joined and he's a busy guy. So,
Yeah, I know. So just, if you have a spare 11 minutes, watch that video we just put in the chat. I mean, John and I worked a lot on that, and as well as a lot of the community contributed, but we tried to distill it down into 11 minutes that you can then understand and then apply to your business, your rev rec situation at your company. So, all right. So Paul is a busy guy and he's joined. Let's see if he's ready to jump, or we want to, take a few more questions before he wants to jump into the presentation. I don't know, Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm ready. You guys tell me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah, we're ready to go if you are. Thanks so
All
much
right,
for joining. Yep.
Sure, of course. Sorry, I had to.
No
join late.
worries.
So
We understand. It gave us the time to talk about Brim and RAR, which John and I have been wanting to do for the last couple of meetings. So it worked out well.
Should I share the presentation?
Yeah, you should share if you can.
Looks like I don't have access to share.
Oh, wait.
Only meeting
Okay, let
organizers.
us make you presenter. Sorry. Apologies. Let's see. Okay, you should be presenter now.
Just gonna share my window.
And Heidi, thanks for joining too. That was great. We were able to. We had the luxury of having Heidi on. She's usually super busy.
You all see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Paul, we're seeing your notes view, so just so you know.
Yeah, I had the same trouble.
Yeah, you
I'm
need to
gonna
flip the screen.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, Game of Thrones.
That Games of Thrones.
Yeah, my favorite.
I'm just gonna keep it like this, and you guys can deal with it. How about that?
That's fine. Yeah, you can pop out. There's a pop out window on the Teams if you want to get a bigger view.
Yeah.
No, he's got it. Looks good.
This one is good.
Okay, so thanks for inviting me to talk about our experience. We've had an incredibly positive experience, and I would just tell this group here that, even though I work for WBD, I'm a career SAP person, 26, 27 years, and I'm a huge advocate of SAP. I think you can do things with SAP that you cannot do with any other software, and I love SAP 100%. So I have a real bias towards SAP. And I also should say that we could not have achieved what we have achieved without the help of our partners, Bramisol. So we've used a number of different partners from a number of different consultants from Bramisol, and each one is better than the last. So that's just my little spiel on that. Like I'm really serious. Like we could not have done this on our own without significant consulting help, and we did reach out to Bramisol. Okay, so and the other thing I would add is everyone should hopefully has HBO Max, because that is us, HBO Max. So if you don't have a subscription, please go get one. Lots of stuff you can watch on HBO Max, sports, everything. But WB is obviously a lot more than HBO. Movies, the DC universe, news, sports. We strive to be your one-stop shop for fiction and nonfiction media. How about that? So,
yeah, that's a great summary. Yeah, thanks.
So let's talk specifically about RAR. So we actually did 2 RAR implementations. The first one was with our ECC system, and that went live in November of 2021. And then we, 13, 14 months later, we converted all of that information into Brim, and that go live was April of 2023, so 6-7 short months ago. And quite honestly, we thought about doing BRIM, before we did ECC, and we just felt that we didn't have time, really was the big thing, and we didn't really know about the WBD and Discovery, the Warner Brothers and Discovery merger that was coming down the pike. So that merger happened, a little bit before our initial go live, and that merger is what led us to go to BRIM. But in terms of our RAR overview, and this information I have here is really applies to both our original ECC implementation and our BRIM implementation. So we use the deferred revenue on billed accounting principle methodology. We do not use CACL, contract asset, contract liability. We have a very, I would say, a very simple RAR implementation. We really only have two types of performance obligations. One uses deferral. They both use deferral method one. They're both time-based. The only difference between the two is one of them does allocations and one of them does not do allocations. So we do allocations. We do have bundled products that we do allocations on. And then, in general, the benefits that I think that you all, if you've implemented RAR, you're already realizing these benefits. But if you haven't, you will be, which is, automated revenue recognition. And I can't emphasize this point enough as it relates to our particular implementation, because the volume is crushing, right? And I'll get to that in subsequent slides, but prior to our RAR implementation, our accounting departments across the globe were basically recognizing revenue on spreadsheets. So they were, calculating what the deferred revenue should be, and then they were posting their journal entries based on those calculations. But all of it was in the spreadsheet, and all of it was Excel based. And hopefully you guys all know that Excel is imperfect. Doesn't give you the precision that you get with SAP RAR. You have rounding issues, you have whatever. So this was a huge benefit to us. And quite honestly, our chief accounting officer basically told our CFO, I'm not going to sign the SEC forms to approve our audit information unless we can automate the direct-to-consumer RAR process. Like, it was that much of an audit issue from our auditors that our chief accounting officer felt like we had to have automation, and that was the real drive to get us to do this automation. Okay. Visibility to revenue numbers day by day rather than only at month end. Again, we're recognizing revenue every single day. We have to, because of the volume. The other thing that we do is, we automate not only the revenue recognition part of this, we automate the settlement. So, as I alluded to earlier, we're using RAR for our direct-to-consumer business. So our basic high-level process is, you go to the website, you register, we collect a credit card, credit card gets charged. We have settlement partners that we do that charging through. So if you pay $14.99, we don't actually collect $14.99. The payment provider is going to give us, let's say, $14.50, and they're going to keep, 49 cents as part of their commission, and bank fees and all this other kind of stuff. So we automate not only the collection of the money, the deferred revenue processing, but also the clearing of those settlements and getting the expense portion of that settlement also correct. So again, that whole process was completely manual, and we've automated everything from start to finish. And again, from your audit perspective, we've gone through now 2 years worth of audits from PwC, who happens to be our auditor, and we pass with flying colors because we have all the information. They come to us and say things like, here's this one transaction, can you trace it from the start to the end? And we have reports that's like a push of a button, and boom, here's everything that you need. or here's a month's worth of revenue, how do you justify it? And we can, pretty easily through reporting, give all that information. Okay, so that's an overview of both of our solutions. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about our ECC solution first, and then after that, I'll talk about our BRIM solution. Okay, so for ECC, I should have listed here our ECC version that we were using was 6. It's ECC 6 enhancement pack 8.
Right. So you had started here, right? This is kind of like the first step, right?
Correct. This is where we started, right?
Yep,
So we went live November of 2021. We use classic contract management. This solution is based on sales orders. Okay. So we basically have a front end system that interacts with the consumer, right? So the SAP is not a consumer facing system. This other system is, but that system would then synchronously call SAP ECC and create a sales order. Okay. And on average, we were creating 175,000 sales orders each day, right? And this is order related billing. So it's sales order to invoice to accounting documents. And then the last point, invoices are cleared through a custom program to process settlements from credit card processors. Okay. We had a number of challenges, as you can imagine, as it relates to performance. Okay. So 175,000 a day gets you about 5.5 million a month. Again, I've been on probably 20 SAP implementations in my career, and I've never had anyone that ever comes close to this volume that we're talking about here. Okay. We had to do a lot of things for the volume. Performance was obviously a huge consideration. We had some other issues, which is the first one is in our implementation, we have customer fields added to BSEG. So we had to extend RAR to have those same customer fields within RAR so that when RAR did the actual accounting posting, we could post those additional fields. RAR makes that super easy. It's like nothing to do, like you could do it if you know what you're doing, you could do it in a day. It's super easy. We did have a couple issues related to RAIs being created for sales orders that weren't saved to the database. So let me talk about this for a second. So ECC struggled with the volume. Okay, I'm going to be real clear about that. We had asked our consumer-facing system not to send more than 50 sales orders a second to us. Sometimes they were good about that, and sometimes they were not good about that. So we saw peaks sometimes of about 175 sales orders a second getting sent to SAP. We couldn't handle that kind of volume peaks, so we would get short dumps occasionally. So sales orders not getting saved to the database. But the point that the dump happened was after the RAI got created. So we would have situations where you would have an RAI, but no sales order. So we solved that problem by basically putting in a little user exit in RAR to basically say, if the sales order doesn't exist, don't create the RAI, right? And that's kind of our Band-Aid around that solution. Okay. The other major issue.
Don't create the RA contract. You said RAI, but the solution was to not create RA contracts.
Sunil is right. Sorry about that. And the other major issue that we had is around data conversions, and this is going to be a consistent issue that we have both here and in BRIM. So let me explain that. And I've got an example at the end of this presentation to really give you the nit and grit details of this. So, when we did not use the SAP data conversion tools. Okay, I want to make that very clear. We did not do any data migration, SAP RAR data migration, and I can't tell you if we did that it would help our problem or not. I don't know that it would, but let me explain our little problem here. So we always took data conversions in terms of an open performance obligation. So when we attacked a data conversion, we would go to either the accounting team or our consumer-facing system and say, we'll do a data conversion. In order to do that data conversion, we need to have the input of the open value of their performance obligation. And then we would create our SAP object based on the open value of the performance obligation. So, to give you a simple example, right? Let's say you have a 1-year contract and it goes January to December and it's for $120. And let's just say, for argument's sake, we're not using this deferral method, but if you were, let's just say you're using deferral method 4, so you're going to get $10 a month, right? January, February, March, April. Okay, make the math really easy. So if we were going to do a data conversion for that particular contract on April 1st, our request was that we needed to know the open performance obligation amount. So in that example, January to December, $120, $10 a month, the open performance obligation amount is $90. Okay? So for the US, where all of your currencies are the same, right? Your transaction currency is USD, your company code currency is USD, and your group currency is USD, this is no issue. We don't have an issue at all. The issue that we have is when your transaction currency is different than your company code currency. So again, the issue that we're having here is that in RAR, I have this, you all see this pop-up window?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So in RAR, you're setting your exchange rate at the date the performance obligations created, right? So in our example, my example I gave, the exchange rate was fixed at January 1 because that's when I created my contract. Now, because we're creating a new performance obligation in a new system, you're fixing that exchange rate on April 1 because that's the time of our data conversion. So when we did this data conversion, and we did this multiple times in multiple systems, and the same issue cropped up every single time in our European entities, the local currency and the group currency balances never matched when you try to compare, because your exchange rate is different between your original contract and in your data conversion contract. Okay, and again, on the last slide, I have a very clear example that'll explain, super clearly what this issue was. It sounds like nothing, right? Fixing the exchange rate at one date versus another isn't a big deal. But in one of our last data conversions, the difference was something like, 600,000 GBP and whatever that is converted to USD. It was a rather significant number. So, we've been through this a couple of times now, so our accounting team kind of knows, okay, here's what's going to happen, here's what we're going to have to do. But the first time we went through this, it was a real struggle to piece together what had happened and why it happened, and what was how do you justify from an audit perspective, what do you do, how do you post the differences versus the prior to data conversion deferred revenue balance and the post data conversion deferred revenue balance. Okay, so another important thing that we had to do just in our ECC world was we had to enable number range buffering between SD and FI, because if you didn't, you could the SAP system could never support the throughput. So that was kind of one big major issue that we had. The other major issue we had from a performance perspective is that when we performed clearing, that last step, when we would have on the first day of the month, we would be clearing over 1 million individual transactions. And the way we structured ECC was that we had very few customers. We maybe had less than 100 customers total, because our customers represented our merchants. So you're running over 1 million records over, less than 100 customers. And SAP is always updating, statistical information around the customer master. So we were getting basically performance locks on the same table. I think the table is something like KNVK. It's some
KNC1.
KNC1. Thank you, Sunil. It's some, some statistical information that's used in FI, and it was killing us. And there was there's really no way around it. That was a limit of using classic FICO, which is basically what we do. Whereas in BRIM, we're using FICA, right? Contracts, accounts receivable, accounts payable. It's a completely different model. And what took us 24 hours in our ECC system takes us like 20 minutes in our BRIM system. Like, it's like amazingly different in terms of the performance. Okay, so that's a quick overview of our ECC solution. And let me go now to our BRIM solution. So, again, we went live October of 2023. We did switch from classic contract management to optimized contract management. That's what we're using in our BRIM system. We are using convergent invoicing. So we have a split. In ECC, you have a sales order and a credit memo request, and it's real easy. They're both sales document types. In BRIM and convergent invoicing, you don't really have a concept of a credit memo request, the same that you do in classic SD ECC. So we process debits through a provider contract, and we process credits through what's called a billable item, and that's something that's within convergent invoicing. The other change that we did is we are no longer having a synchronous interface with our consumer-facing system. We put digital route convergent mediation in between our consumer-facing system and our our BRIM system. And what that's allowed us to do is kind of smooth the performance. So what we have happening now in our BRIM implementation is that our consumer-facing system is constantly sending records to convergent mediation. That's happening 24/7. And then convergent mediation is batching that up and sending it to our BRIM system once every, I think, 4 or 5 hours. So we have a batch process that runs at 4 a.m., 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. So we process 5 batches a day, and it is just totally smooths the performance. Whereas in our ECC solution, we were kind of a slave to our consumer-facing solution and the spikes it had in performance. So that was a huge win for us. Whether you guys know about convergent mediation or not, convergent mediation is designed for high volume processing, and whatever SAP is going to support in terms of volume, convergent mediation is going to support something faster. So there's not really any fear of having something, SAP waiting on CM. It's always going to be the other way around. Since we have gone live, we keep adding functionality to our BRIM solution. So the numbers I took were from November of last year. That's 175,000 a day. We're up to 300,000 records a day as of October of this year. And we expect that volume to almost double by June of next year. Okay, so we just keep adding and throwing volume into our system. The other big change that we made, obviously, is that invoices here are cleared via payment lots rather than a custom program that we had in our ECC system. And a payment lot, again, is a specific FICA functionality. And we had great success doing this. So, a couple of issues that we have that I want to talk through. The first one is, again, we're always kind of screwed by exchange rates. I hate to say that, but it is what it is. So in Brim, we didn't really realize until we went live that the exchange rate calculation done by FICA at invoicing is different than the exchange rate that was done in RAR. So what would happen is you would create an invoice, you would post an invoice, and then that invoice would get sent to RAR. And then the local and the group currency values that were listed in FICA were slightly different than the values listed in RAR. And that's obviously not correct. So we went to SAP OSS, and this issue was solved through the OSS note that I have listed here. But we went live. We were basically 2.5 months live before we got that issue fixed. And it took SAP OSS a while to fix it because of just the integrated nature of whatever the fix they had to do. It took a couple of different teams to fix that, but they did, happily fix that. Again, we did in our Brim system, we also have customer fields added to BSEG. So, again, that's another complexity we have. And my favorite data conversion from ECC to Brim, we had the exact same issue that I talked about before. And then the volume. So, as you can see, our volume is increasing, rapidly. So we have, I think the last time we checked, we had something like 58 or 59 million revenue accounting contracts. And I don't know how many POBs we have to have over 100 million at this point, probably significantly more than that. So, each of our RA contracts has a minimum of 2 POBs, and some of them that are annual contracts can have as many as, 12 or 14 POBs. So, and whether or not you all know, there is this logical limit of 2 billion rows in a table in HANA. You can partition database tables to get beyond that limit, which is perfectly fine, but we really don't want to go down that path. So we are currently in the testing phases of an archiving project where we are planning to archive records off our production environment and into we're using an OpenText tool for data storage. And basically, we plan to archive records after 13 months of their contract end date. So we plan to basically have 1 year's worth of data in our live production system and then archive it. And if it's needed for anything else, you can just pull it from the archive. Okay. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Okay, so let's talk about our little exchange rate issue here. So contract created on March 15th in XXX company code with a document currency of 143 NOK converts to 1112 GBP with that exchange rate and 1356 with that exchange rate. This contract would have converted to Brim on April 1. For this contract, we would have recognized 78.53 in March and 64.67 is deferred. So at the time of our data conversion, we would have processed an open POB at 64.67 and OK. Now, this data conversion would have a different exchange rate because, again, we are creating a new performance obligation in a new system on April 1. And instead of the recalculated April 1 date instead of the original March 15th date. These differences amount to pennies on monthly contracts and more on annual contracts. But, in this particular example, the difference, as you can see, is 3 GBP and 7 USD. Totally immaterial. But when you talk about those numbers over 5 million contracts, then it becomes somewhat material. Okay. So
for us, I mean, I just want to add here, Paul. For us, the important thing is that it's not just creating a RISE and a POB and a contract for conversion. We actually create operational documents. This is to support any changes because any contract, like which is an annual contract, you migrate midway into the system, be it TCC or BRIM, we had the same issue. You have to create the operational document because that contract might get extended, that contract might get terminated. So you have to account for all the changes. So we had to create all the operational documents which will drive the RAI creation and then the POB and then the subsequent processes, right? So that's where the issue is that the accounting whatever they had before, if they were not in the SAP system, like if they were doing it in Excel earlier, so at that point of time they know what was the open deferred revenue, but then you get that into the system. This conversion, the exchange rates is what troubled us.
Yeah.
So
Thank
is
you.
this now the same issue that you listed on the previous slide?
Same issue, exact same issue.
And then you resolved it with a note, or
no, that's
so,
a different issue.
Yeah, different issue.
Okay.
So this issue, the problem that you have is that your deferred revenue balance isn't going to be aligned because you've reset the exchange rate. Okay, that's the real issue. So what our accounting teams did is they basically created adjusting entries in SAP FI where they put the transaction currency as 0, local currency as whatever, and group currency as whatever. And they basically recognize the revenue, like what because of because it was for debit versus credit, right? They calculated that it's a recognition of revenue and not a deficit of revenue, right? So they credited revenue for the difference, and that's how they got around it. It's not getting around it; it's how they made the accounting come to 0.
Right, they're making an adjustment for it. Okay.
Correct.
Now, I guess maybe I'll ask Chin, maybe a follow-up. We'll just follow up. Who's our BRIM and RAR currency expert? We should probably dig into that a little bit.
Yeah.
After the call, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, again, because we were not using the SAP tools, this is kind of one of the ramifications of not
Side
using
effects,
an SAP tool right now.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in the SAP data conversion tools, but if you were to use the SAP migration concept, I don't know if this issue is there or not. I couldn't tell you.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that. Yeah, clarification.
Okay, what I'm sure hopefully people have questions. What
yeah, I mean, I
questions
think
can I answer?
maybe what we want to do is we're starting to transition now. It looks like you're through with presenting the slides, so
Yep.
appreciate that, and just want to thank Oslam and Clement for bringing the idea to us that you would present, and thanks for presenting yourself and Sunil. So now we want to let's see if people have questions on the content of the slides, and then John and I will want to segue to kind of a fireside chat to talk a little bit more about, your migration or conversion from CCM to OCM, because that we also think customers will be interested in.
Hey Pete, this is Parag here from Trellix.
Hi Parag.
Hey.
Parag.
Hey.
Good to hear from you. Yep, sure.
Yep. Hey, quick question, guys. And this is an overall arching principle. I think primary question is when you use RAR, right? The RAR is one side of things, but on the AR side, what processes are you all following? Are you putting everything to deferred and then recognizing the revenue, or are you doing the push everything to revenue and the invoice correction and then revenue? And that's a question not just for not just for Warner Bros. Discovery.
For anybody, yeah, man, yeah.
But anybody, right? Yeah. So, but Paul, great presentation, by the way. So
thank you.
I'll take that question. I mean, I've done multiple implementations. I mean, there's a concept which when we were first implementing SAP, we were SAP RAR. We had the same question: why the heck should it go to revenue first and then you move it out of revenue? But then we realized that that's how SAP has designed it, and that's the way to go. And we always put it into not only here, but in my previous implementations, we always post it to revenue. RAR comes in, moves it out of that, and then reclass whatever is needed portion to deferred, and whatever needs to go to revenue goes to revenue. So that's how it has been always.
So this gets down to the posting logic, right?
Yeah.
Parag, Sunil, this is Jacek from Brahmasol. Let me add to that. A lot of companies have a bill up front, recognize later, deliver later model, which is we see so common in technology where somebody orders something, pays for it, and the service is delivered later. And that works great for that concept, but Parag, you mentioned where you, in SD, you configure it to go directly to deferred revenue because whenever you bill your customer, you never recognize immediately. However, with RAR, and we also face the same situation, you have to think that it's designed for companies that might bill after they've delivered service. So having their billed revenue go to balance sheet deferred revenue immediately makes no sense, right? Actually, we should need to go to they haven't billed yet, right? So RER, there's nothing in deferred revenue at all. So RER would need to do its work, do recognition, and not even touch the balance sheet on the deferred side for quite some time. So it's an interesting slant that we see in industries that always bill upfront, deliver later, and folks have sort of gotten into that common sense that all revenue should be deferred. We actually had some customers who struggled with the concept of accrued revenue, of revenue that's been earned but hasn't been billed yet. So, but you are correct that the change to Sunil's comment is because of the invoice correction design.
And this gets to the posting logic. So I think, so Chin, I guess the question to you is that posting logic described in the manuals anywhere?
Yeah, that's a posting scheme defined in the help documentation. And also I can comment that the reason we designed this posting logic is not to dramatically require the change of the sender component. We do not want to say that with the deployment of RAR, all in a sudden, for example, the billing, so-called the sender component like SD, all in a sudden now post to deferred revenue. They would continue to post, and RAR actually, if you look at all the accounts or the posting category, we call those posting category, we always call it revenue adjustment and the receivable adjustment. So we are actually doing adjustment posting.
Okay.
And Parag, to your question, the issue is if you don't run RAR frequently, then it becomes a big issue. But otherwise, if you are posting to revenue and then RAR is doing its posting job every day or more frequently, then that's not a big issue. Otherwise, yes, I agree that you will have issues because everything is lying in revenue, and that's really is not revenue.
And that's the risk, which on a business sense, right? And what I'm seeing is that, boss, if you have, and there are multiple things, right? An error a contract can go to error. You could put a recon key, push it out to the next month. It will stop posting, do what not, right? And the risk to the controllers is how I hear it is basically everything lying in revenue and somebody missing, right? And overstating revenue. So what I heard was that basically, hey, you know what, my risk is reduced if it's lying in deferred. At least I'm not overstating revenue. I did reason with them saying that the other side of this is you will leave revenue on the table, right? I mean but anyway, so good to know. I mean, just perspective, right, amongst us users who use this product.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. Hey Parag, this is Saurav here from Autodesk. I think we had other way around, right? We actually defer our revenue when the billing happens. And we also had the similar issue initially when we started implementing RAR. But with the small tweaks as well as some OSS nodes, we actually do the invoice correction against the balance sheet versus the P&L, and it is working fine in our case. So to your point, if the revenue is the contract is added out, our revenue is still sitting in the deferred only. So we have that business model, and it is working fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing.
Paul, Sunil, this is Jacek from Brahmasol. I have a question really on more or less functionality, but operations side. And Paul, if I heard you right, you transitioned fully to OCM at this point, correct?
Correct.
But even for those of us who are still, or for those customers who are still on ECC, but also talk about OCM, can you tell us a little bit about the frequency of both processing data into the engine? So with Classic, you would the whole write processing jobs. How often would you run this? And also on the back end, the processing of posting into the GL. Obviously, with OCM, that's happening in real time, but we have this addition. But where I'm going with this is with CCM, you had to have these processes to watch out for failed writes, which maybe failed out and went into raw mode, or failed postings, which the posting job failed out and give you contracts and errors. Same thing now with OCM. Obviously, if the write itself isn't processed, it's put aside an unprocessed mode, right? The real-time processing and optimized input management, but also in your posting side, right? How often, what do you do, especially at your super high volumes, to kind of keep an eye out of that things aren't falling off the table before you do month end?
Yeah, okay, so a couple of things. So just Sunil, correct me where I'm wrong here. Okay, we are using OCM, but in terms of the RAI processing, we're still using Classic. Is that right, Sunil?
That's right. We don't use optimized inbound processing. We use classic inbound processing with OCM.
Correct. Okay, so let's clarify that point. Okay, so we are up. Go ahead.
Sorry. And that was a design choice because of scenario coverage, Sunil?
That was because we wanted to have some control on the timing of the processing of rice, because there are different processes which work specifically at Warner Brothers, and we wanted to have a control on when we transfer rice from FICA to RAR. And if you use OIP, you don't have that control anymore. But with the classic inbound, you can decide at what intervals you want to transfer rice from transfer information from FICA to RAR.
Okay. Specifically around month-end processing, we had this concern. Okay, like we didn't want to have, documents processed in the next month before we had closed the RAR month. So we always close the RAR month on day one. Okay, of workday day one, regardless Saturday, Sunday, whatever. And also in terms of your question about volume, I want to emphasize that we have a mean, lean team. It's a team of like really 3 or 4 people, right? Like we can't, given the volume, we expect 0 errors, right? If one transaction is going to error, then 175,000 transactions are going to error. So we are like laser focused on not having those kind of errors that you're suggesting. We've made our process such that we
try to foolproof it as much as you can, right?
We kind of expect 0 errors. Like if there's an error in the record coming in, we don't create the provider contract, or we don't create the refund bit. We don't in the sale or the sales order. Like we didn't create the record at all. Like we either create it correctly or we don't create it. We don't create it incomplete, because again, the volume is overwhelming, right? So I want to also make that point. Like I'm trying to think, Sunil, in like the 2.5 years that we've been live on this product, like how many real RAI errors did we have? How many posting errors did we have? It's like I can count on my hand less than 10, right? Is that right, Sunil?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, we just, it's just we couldn't survive with the team we have managing, like let's take these contracts and shift the month, right? Like we're not doing any of that stuff because we can't. It's impossible. The volume would kill us.
We have controls up front which make sure that because our ordering system is not SAP in this case for the DTC business, our ordering system is the commerce system, and commerce system is feeding data to SAP. So we do a lot of checks in the interface and make sure that we catch all errors there. There are of course errors definitely, but then we have automated a lot of that error handling. First of all, catch the errors and then the error handling, error resolution. So one person is dedicatedly doing this for us, looking into these errors. There are errors every day there, of course, but then we don't want to create down the line documents, because then you are getting into a situation where you have to reverse documents, you have to cancel POBs. We don't want to do all of that because that's adding more effort. So that's why we put all our effort into handling the inbound at the very first step, which is creating a provider contract or a bit. And if everything is good, then we allow that to get created, and then the rest of the process rather becomes smooth.
Yeah. So to finish answering your question, again, when we process our batches in BRIM, right, 4, 8, 12, 4, 8, we process the entire string. So it's like create the provider contract, create the bid, do the billing, do the invoicing, transfer the RAI from FICA to RAR, do the RAI processing, right? In those 5 batch schedules, we do that every single time, okay? And then we have one batch schedule at 12:30 a.m. to do the recognition of revenue. And that batch schedule, there are batch jobs per company code. And then we use the standard delivered SAP parallelization to smooth the processing across the volume. Our biggest day of volume is always the first of the month, because on the first of the month you're recognizing revenue for all of the POBs that have performance obligations within that month. So the first of the month we're seeing like 6-7 hours to recognize revenue, but the rest of the days of the month it's like 10 minutes max to recognize revenue.
Yeah, with the OCM, definitely the performance is huge. The performance gains which we got is huge.
Paul, I'm interested in that follow up for a second. Sorry, yes. One of the things that I learned, and I think was also I heard from others, is you talk about parallelization or parallelization. That's a tough word, right? But you guys have kind of a very interesting approach to that, because can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think it's a great way that you've also not only upstream managed the risk by doing data quality, but you've also done something clever downstream as you're doing this parallel processing to minimize this idea of large volumes and rework. Maybe you can, if you're open to it, share a little bit more about your thinking on that.
Yeah, sure, 100%. So, we use all of the standard SAP tools that SAP delivers. And again, I'm going to go back to my opening statement, which is I love SAP. You can do goddamn anything with SAP. It's amazing. Okay, so many of the convergent invoicing BRIM functions have built-in parallelization. So when you're creating bits, or when you're creating CI billing or CI invoicing, SAP has inbuilt parallelization. So we're just taking advantage of the standard SAP delivered functionality for parallelization. RAR also has standard delivered parallelization. There's a configuration setting that says, how many parallel jobs you want to trigger. So we're using all of that we are using. Now, when it comes to creating our documents, we had to create parallelization, right? Because standard SAP does not have that. But SAP is great. It has something that's called the SPTA framework. And basically, if you know a little bit of ABAP, you can have any one of your programs use this parallelization. So as you build your programs, and I've just added it to the chat, it's called SPTA framework. If you just do a Google search, you'll find tons of stuff on it. And basically what this allows you to do is, let's say you have 50,000 provider contracts that you want to create. You can write your program in such a way that SAP automatically does parallelization for you based on your system load. So there is there's a functionality in SAP that's called a server group. So let's say you have 5 application servers, and you want to have 3 of them dedicated to background processing and 2 of them dedicated to foreground, like user processing. So you can create a server group for those 3 dedicated application servers for background processing, and you can configure that server group to say, I want it to take, when I'm running parallelization, I want it to take 60% of available work processes and execute it based on those available work processes. And then when you submit your job to the SBTA framework, SAP just handles it, right? Like as a programmer or as a as a person designing these things, you don't have to worry about what's the system load. Like our consulting partner who implemented BRIM wanted to write this like very complicated thing, and I told them there's no way in hell you're doing that. Just use SPTA framework. And we use that in our ECC system as well. So in our ECC system, we had a batch job that was creating 1 million sales orders on the first day of every month. Okay, we use SPTA framework, and again, the ABAP coding is really not that complex. We were able to create 1 million sales orders on the first day of each month within about 6 hours, right? So think about the processing. Now, we had, in our ECC system, we had 5 application servers, and those application servers were dedicated to our global business, right? So at the time, we have, at any one time, our SAP system is a 24/7 SAP system. You have users in US, in Europe, in Asia, in India, like, and first of the month is a heavy usage of all of our accounting users. Even still, with all of that volume, we're still able to process 1 million sales orders in 6 or 7 hours, right? That's the power of SPTA framework. Did that answer your question, John?
Yeah, it did. And I think the other thing you've done is through the whole process, it's that parallelization that says, let me bite this up into chunks that I can consume, and then further bite those chunks down so that this processing goes on almost in a real-time basis. And you guys pretty much, from what I understood from Sunil and speaking with you and Kathy, you can almost close your books on a close to a daily basis, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. Like the only reason, so when we close the RAR period on the first day of the month, we're waiting for one particular batch job to finish that doesn't run until 2:30. If it wasn't for that, we'd be closing the books at like 9 a.m. on the first day of the month. Like we're not waiting for anything. I mean, everything just happens. It's like, I mean, I don't want to say it's like magic, but it's, I mean, our accounting team doesn't do anything, right? All they do is execute reports. They don't process anything.
John, and another interesting example I want to quote here, especially those who are on ECC, it might help. The way we do the parallelization in ECC, you don't have that functionality similar to FICA. The extent of parallelization which you get, for example, ECC invoicing, that was a big pain for us. I mean, Paul mentioned that is one of the slides as an issue. So, we don't have end users as the customers. So all our million customers, 2 million, 5 million customers, they're not actually customers in the ECC system. For us, the payment is coming from the payment provider. So the merchants, ADN, PayPal, different merchants and different geos, they are our customers because that's the payer. And then you are posting the outstanding against that payer. So when the invoicing job, if it has to run, when you do the parallelization in the standard ECC, it only does based on those sold to parties, right? And the bill to parties. Right. And you have a very small set of customers. I mean, your records are like running into millions, but your customers are what, 17, 20 at the most. And then if you parallelize between these 20, and system will never be able, I mean, system will complete the run, but it takes a lot of time to finish the invoicing on a daily basis. So we came up with this new approach where SAP provides you a field called sort criteria. And then we have a random number generator using a custom code. It's a simple code. You can generate this random number generator. So you can decide how many threads you want. So in our case, we decided to have 30 threads. So the random number generator keeps generating a number for every invoice that gets created. And in the for every order that's created. And in the VKDFS table, which is the billing due table, you could see this random number against every order because ours is order-based invoicing. And then when the billing job runs, we don't use standard SAP parallelization. We rather created our own parallelization, including those sort criteria, like sort criteria 1 to 2 go into one job, 3 to 4 going to another job, something like that. So you create your own parallelization. You know, it's using standard SAP functionality, nothing funky there, but just that you have to understand the functionality which is available out there, because a lot of people don't know what's a sort criteria on a VF04 screen is all about until unless you come across this kind of situations, right? For customers who have the SAP system as the ordering system, then you will create every customer, your end customer as a customer in SAP. So you will not face this issue. But for customers like us, where we had to create a small set of customers as our sold parties, and that's when this kind of alternative approach really worked.
Yeah. And that was amplified, Paul and Sunil, I think, by your also work, you know, as we see people, you know, some folks on here, in-app purchases amplified that, right? Because now you have provisioning that goes on in parallel with, well, what now happens from a revenue recognition perspective, right?
Correct.
So
Go ahead, Paul.
So we have, within our BRIM implementation, we have a couple of sub implementations, right? We have one implementation for a direct to consumer business where you come to the website and you pay, and we own the monetization, right? We own the credit card, we own the customer relationship. And then we have a separate implementation all within BRIM for what we call IAP purchases, right? So you're purchasing Macs through Google or through Apple or through Samsung or Roku or Vizio or any one of these other partners, Amazon. So we have a completely different approach to the IAP processing than to the direct processing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And because of this IAP process now, what our accounting used to take almost, because these are huge files coming in from your partners like Apple, Google, Roku. These are like the time they used to take to reconcile all of that information and post the revenue into the system. It used to take almost like a week, and now we are doing that in a couple of hours.
And the real processing for us takes, like, let's say we process a file at 10, we're done at 12, but we don't kick off the revenue recognition until the next morning at 12:30. So we always tell them, if the file gets created today, you can look at the results tomorrow. But really, there's, 12 hours of dead time in there. We're just waiting for the revenue recognition process to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's those are some great insights on. It just sounds like you guys looked at your overall process, and I would call it put in some foolproofing, right? Make sure that you thought about it very holistically, and as things come through, right? If there was an issue, like you said, you don't have the people, so you're trying to make sure it's kind of foolproof, not to create more issues. One other aspect is maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the CCM to OCM transition or migration, because we do have a lot of customers that are going to be looking at that, or maybe looking at that now.
So ours is not a migration, Pete. Unfortunately, we cannot give a lot of inputs there. But we had CCM in our ECC box, which is a separate system, and then BRIM is a separate box where we have implemented everything net new, and then we just created contracts with OCM. Whatever the opening, the deferred revenue balances in the ECC system were brought over into the BRIM system as provider contracts.
So it's kind of a greenfield then?
Yeah, it's a greenfield, exactly.
Okay.
It's not like we migrated from CCM to OCM.
Correct. Right. Remember what I said. We're not using any SAP migration tools. We created things from scratch.
But did you but did you then convert open balances in terms of, because you have multiple POBs? How did you get the balances around, what are the TP, SSP, etc., what was already recognized, deferred, and then you brought in?
Exactly. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. The RAR tables have that information, right? Like otherwise, how would RAR know how to do the posting for the next month? So within the RAR tables, all of that information is available. You just have to kind of cull it out. So when we did our transition from ECC to BRIM, I basically created a CDS view, right? And that CDS view would show you per RAR contract and sales order what was the open balance, right? And that's how we verified when we did the data conversion that the ECC open POB balance matched the BRIM provider contract that we created. Like we converted something like 5.5 million records, and the numbers matched to the penny.
I mean, you have all that information, the def item tables, right? So that's where the CDS view is getting most of the information from.
Yeah, understand that. So my question is more around the provider contract was created with the same value as the original ECC contract? No,
Yeah.
only
No,
open. Okay.
So go to my example I gave earlier, right? You bought it in January, and it's January to December. It's $120. Okay, and we're doing our conversion on April 1. So our data conversion provider contract was created for the value of 90, or the open POB balance, right? Because in our our legacy system, we had already recognized revenue for January for 10, February for 10, March for 10. We're going to do April to December in our BRIM system. So the open POB balance is 90.
And to that,
Okay.
our line of business, right? There is no customer AR because everything is upfront. You have customer has already paid for it. There's a credit card. We charge the credit card. We started the subscription for that month or for that year. So we don't have any issue with AR as such. Our only issue is deferred revenue. How do we get that deferred revenue? Open AR is very minimal, but it's not actually open AR. It's open unsettled items, open items from an accounting standpoint, not from an AR standpoint, because everything is already paid for via credit card.
Got it, Sunil. My question is that you're saying TP90 was brought in. What about the allocated amount though? Because do you have multiple POBs first in a contract, right? Is it like multiple POBs in one contract or just one-to-one?
One-to-one.
One-to-one, I see. Okay.
We have few which are bundles, but majority of us for contracts are not bundles.
I see. Because I was worried about how do you get the allocated amount, because that's the real value that you would recognize. Anyways, thank you. No, but this is
but Sunil, here I don't believe we did any data conversion into BRIM for bundles. However, the same logic that we used would still
exactly.
Right?
You just bring over the balance.
Yeah. Just the open POB balance. What a period, it doesn't matter because.
And you don't do allocations when you migrate over, right? Because there's just a recognition which needs to happen for that open POBs.
Right, but Sunil made an important point. Important point is all of our billing is in advance. We have no billing in arrears, none, which makes our life easy.
Right. Other questions? Great question, Parag. Thank you. I know there's a lot of people on here from different organizations.
This is Petra here from support. Paul, can I have a question? You was speaking about archiving project regarding the data volume.
Yes.
Are you planning to archive BRIM data or revenue accounting contracts as well?
Both end to end.
Both.
We're gonna archive provider contract, bit.
We'll start from the revenue contract and go all the way back to the provider contract.
But it's basically it's every object in the chain. So it's provider contract, bit, CI billing, CI invoice, FICA document, payment lot, RAR contract, POB.
I mean, payment lot is separate, but in this chain, it's everything all the way up to revenue accounting contract, including the RISE.
What? Hold on. Just so for payment lot, what SAP says is they archive the payment lot items, but they don't archive the payment lot header because the payment lot number is an external number assignment. So that's why, even though the status of it is archived, it's not physically deleted from the database, which is fine.
Okay, and how long will the revenue accounting contract stay in the database? So how long runtime do you plan to have?
So we plan to have online 13 months. We're going to archive 13 months after the contract end date. Okay. And then we're going to store in the archive for 9 years, and then we'll delete from the archive after 9 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one more question. Do you plan to, or how often do you think you will need to access the archives with revenue accounting contracts? So the read access, what would be the need for that?
My own personal opinion is never. But,
okay.
but you know, you never know. I personally think never. But
okay.
Like,
thank you.
If I think of the things that the accounting team has asked us to do, I haven't been asked to look at any contract from 2001. In 2021, any contracts from 2021 in 2023. I haven't been asked to look at barely any contracts in like the first 6 months of 2022 in 2023. Like everything they're doing is within the last year. And that's kind of why we made the decision of 13 months after end date.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Hey, Paul, this is Heidi. Quick questions. Oh, sorry, did I cut Sunil off?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So Brim is definitely on the sidecar separate landscape, so you can build greenfield, right? Is RAR in the same landscape or in another landscape with central finance or ECC?
No, that's a good question. So our legacy ECC system, so at WBD, we actually have 5 legacy ERP systems. Okay, we have a legacy Discovery ECC, we have a legacy Warner Media ECC, we have another S4 system somewhere else, and we have PeopleSoft and Oracle. Like, we love spending money. We have all this stuff. So in our our legacy ECC system had RAR installed as an add-on. And then in our Brim implementation, which was a greenfield Brim implementation, we also installed, you don't have to install RAR, it comes standard in S4, right? So we have that. We do have a CFIN system, which we are activate. Also, we are going to be using RAR in that system eventually. But in each instance, we have RAR. So there's no centralized RAR, okay? Because, and I'll tell you why, because our ECC system, legacy Discovery ECC system, is eventually going to go away and is going to migrate into what is now our CFIN system, okay? So that's why we need to have it in the CFIN system, because it's going to be doing RAR for some other things that we do in WBD, not direct to consumer. But ultimately, yes, we're going to have CFIN's going to have RAR, and our Brim system has RAR. We did look at having only one RAR system, and we just felt that, again, performance-wise, we couldn't be doing ALE records in between Brim and the CFIN RAR. Is kind of what the decision was. You can, I know you can do it, right? But we just decided to.
Yeah, I think it's the right decision. If you have that volume, typically Brim and RAR in the same box.
Yep.
Exactly. That's the reason why we decided to go that way, where we said the CFIN, we will not do it. We'll do it here, and then the revenue numbers go to the CFIN box.
Yep.
If it's a high volume, you don't want to burden the CFIN box.
Exactly.
Because, yeah.
Thank you, Heidi. Great. Pete, we are down to 1 minute. That was an awesome, robust conversation, Paul and Sunil.
I know, it
thank
really
you.
was. Yeah, any final Go ahead,
Yeah,
Paul.
one final thing I want to emphasize this is that we couldn't have done this without the help of our Bramisol consultant, and Sunil is from Bramisol, and we love him, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. And thanks to
Similar
the product team
story
on the
at
line,
IIM.
they get to hear the good news from a customer. So
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great use case, Brim and RAR. And I just interviewed Kathy Romano a couple weeks ago in the conference.
Yep. She's a big advocate for us.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we are at
Thank
the
you,
top.
Paul.
Yep. Go ahead,
Thank you,
Parag.
Paul, for putting this together. Thank you again, Pete, everyone, John.
Sure.
you.
So anyway, let's just wrap up. We're at the top of the hour. Sorry we started a little late, but next time look for the invite. I guess the issue is for each meeting we'll probably have a separate Teams invite. So anyway, for the next one, look for a different one. We're looking for, right now, we've tentatively scheduled February 9th, but that could shift, but we're trying to do, basically mid-February for the next meeting. We do have another customer that's volunteered, so we'll sync with them afterwards next week to see if we can make that happen. We'll send the meeting follow-up materials out next week, and we'll convert the registration link to a replay link in case someone else missed it. They can always register for the replay and get the materials as well. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks again, John and Bramisol, for your sponsorship as well. And everyone have a good rest of your day.
And thank you so much
Thank
to
you.
Paul and
Yeah.
Sunil. They were awesome.
Thank you very
and
much.
guiding
Yeah.
Thanks,
for
guys.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
Bye.
thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks, bye.
Make it a great day, guys.